First of all, thank you all for coming. This has been a great summer series. We've shown some really great films this summer and had some great conversations about them. I'm going to begin by talking a little bit about the film, and then we're going to have some questions briefly, and then if you have some questions, we'll open it up to you. But this is based on a novel by William Styron. Styron was a Southern writer who idolized Thomas Wolfe. He had a great talent for finding controversy. Styron's first novel was called The Confessions of Nat Turner. It's about the Nat Turner slave rebellion. At the time, he was very criticized for writing in the character of a black person and describing that person committing acts of violence. James Baldwin, the great American writer, defended him, but we can imagine that today he would equally have been criticized. Similarly, Sophie's Choice, when Styron was writing in the 70s, all the famous writers at the time whom he envied, Philip Roth, Bernard Malamud, Saul Bellow, were all Jewish. And so Styron wanted to write a Jewish novel, and so he came up with a way for him to do that. And again, at the time, the book was very successful, but also there were some criticisms that this was not really his story to tell, or that perhaps he was using the Holocaust as sort of window dressing for his art. So those are just things to think about as we take on this subject. Meryl Streep, nominated for an Academy Award. She may have won an Academy Award for this performance. It was directed by Alan J. Pakula, who also wrote the script. He's the same director who did All the President's Men and The Parallax View and Clute. And Pakula was famous, and he was the producer of To Kill a Mockingbird. And Pakula was famous for really examining people's psychological states. And in some ways, that's what this movie is all about. But I first wanted to turn to you and talk about, from your knowledge and teaching of this subject, is there how historically accurate did you feel Sophie's story was or could be?
I think that's an important topic to talk about with this film. I think there is an importance of Sophie's Choice within the history of Holocaust films kind of through the years, because it's one of the earlier ones and really brought the topic of the Holocaust and the themes of the Holocaust to public discussion. And this is released only a few years after the TV series Holocaust, which also starred Meryl Streep, interestingly. And it's kind of when people are starting to talk more and more about it. But then at the same time, it's odd that it's a Holocaust story that doesn't really include the Jews. They're kind of in the periphery of the story. And especially to set this specific story in Auschwitz, where approximately 1.1 million people were murdered, and 1 million of them were Jews. So to not really focus on that story, not to say that the other groups that were persecuted shouldn't have their stories told, but the fact that this specific film focuses on a Catholic Polish woman, where this kind of situation wouldn't really happen with a family unit in that way being brought to Auschwitz. And usually with people who were either working with the resistance or accused of working with the resistance, they would be used as an example. So they would typically be executed, usually shot or hanged very publicly, to kind of scare people in towns and communities away from rising up and fighting back.
If you notice in the film, her tag has a P. Yeah, I'm going to go to you in a second. So she's a political prisoner. 50,000 to 70,000 Polish Catholics were murdered at Auschwitz. So there is a basis for that. But again, now Mary.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yeah, please.
So there was the Polish Catholics and Polish prisoners were the second largest in the number of people who were murdered, but when you look at percentages of communities, it's the Roma Sinti, or formerly referred to as gypsies, who were murdered in the highest percentage. So the likelihood of survival was higher, if that makes sense.
Now, Mary has the history of having graduated from this terrible institution. And tell us your perspective.
I love the way you are phrasing that. Yes, that used to be my husband's favorite introduction. This is my wife who graduated from Auschwitz. But back to what you mentioned, this was very interesting for me to notice right away. There was a red little triangle.
Right.
The system at that time was that they put on different color and identification. Obviously, we know the Jews were the big yellow star. But the political had the little red one, and the criminals had a green one. And Auschwitz had a certain system where the criminals were in charge of the Jews. Sadly enough, nobody cared how they treated us. The Poles and the Polish women, because I was in a women camp, have been not mingling with the Jews at arrival. As I have seen in this film, the cattle cars were bringing the people. But the only difference I have seen here, which is allowed for a movie, for a writer, that it is not totally identical because it's not as a documentary. A documentary has to be very accurate. But here was interesting to notice that when they came out of the cattle car, that right away there were some Germans who took the authority and the right of deciding what happening to the prisoners who came out, including his personal feeling obviously was involved of punishing her for not responding to his affection, or what I found very interestingly at the end of the film, the way how it ended, we realized at the end that we dealt here with two very disturbed people. Sophie carried the guilt. She carried the guilt because she adored her father, who was her idol in a male. But when she typed his work, then she realized that he was an anti-Semitic bastard, and she was totally shaken in her belief. And this went on through her life. America was a disappointment for her. The people were strange. She was hungry for acknowledgement, hungry for attachment, hungry for love.
But it was also no escape from
But-
her. Being in America was no escape from having been in Auschwitz.
Absolutely not.
You were in Stutthof camp
And-
also.
No, I was in Ravensbrück.
Oh, Ravensbrück, which is the women's camp in
Only women.
only women in Sweden.
Only women, and I have been with a lot of Christian women, particularly Jehovah's Witnesses, because Jehovah's Witnesses were political because they did not accept the war. They did not accept that they or their family members are going to be in the war or sanction the policies of the Nazi regime. And I have been a lot, almost half, in the Ravensbrück camp with Christians who have been prior of our arrival, because Auschwitz, as you know from history, when the Russians liberated Auschwitz, we have been transported to different camps. So after Auschwitz, with the Death March, I was in Gross-Rosen. In Gross-Rosen, we were again put into cattle cars. Out of the cattle cars, we were transported to German territory, where at this point, the war was from two fronts attacking the Germans. They came from the west and they came from the east. And at this point, from the east, of all the camps which they have had, they have vacated the Jews, whoever was able, capable to walk, or according them, to be useful, to work. They took them into German ground, to German territory, where they felt that it's much safer than being either caught by the Russians. The original plan was for Auschwitz to blow it up so that nobody knows what they have done.
Which is what they did at Treblinka.
But they couldn't get
At
around.
Treblinka, they completely wrote it over.
Um,
But I have a question for you. Did you, in your personal experience, at any of these camps, did you ever witness, or do you think it even possible that someone would be offered a Sophie's choice?
Well, I have not personally experienced it, but I have watched it and seen. I don't know what became of those people or how it followed through. But during the Death March, we had next to us young Germans with a gun, and they were accompanying us, and who couldn't walk, they just shot them right then and there. At the same time, the Germans were also liquidating their paperwork, their offices, and they had boxes and typewriters and whatever they needed to take for their next, wherever we're planning to go. They had like a cart which was pulled by a horse. And what I have seen, that there was a very beautiful girl, my age at that time, because at that time I was 16, and obviously you know that at arrival we were processed differently than what you seen here. And we were kind of shaved, but I personally had at that time about like a 2 or 3 inch long hair. But this girl who was also marching with us had longer hair. She was very pretty. And I don't know whether she was Polish or French or Dutch because we did not talk. But what we noticed that one of the soldiers were talking to her and offered her to go on the little
Cart. The cart.
truck.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, he lifted her up and set her down there. And that was the only thing where I noticed that this girl was accompanied like I was with my mother, but they were sisters together, or friends, or relatives, or other mother and daughter together. And this girl left behind whoever she was with, because I remember vaguely. This brought back a lot of memory for that she was reluctant, but on the other hand, she knew that she can't walk. That was in January, where Poland had snow, and obviously people could not walk very well in the snow. They were also not dressed according with warm clothes, or they were all malnourished, so they didn't have the strength. And this girl actually realized the way how we were watching, including me seeing that, how people who could not walk or keep up, they were just shot. And it was a horrible view of seeing the red blood in the white snow. But this girl obviously left behind some people
Yes.
who were attached to her. Now, I have no idea who she was, but there was, in my memory up till now, particularly because what I've seen here, that there was almost something like she was reluctant, but at the same time she made a decision. And her decision was to leave everything behind, but allow this soldier to lift her up and put her down on this little cart.
And did you ever see her again in the camp, or?
Never.
Never.
No.
Let me ask you, I brought this up a little bit at the beginning. As someone who works at a Holocaust museum, do you feel that this movie, do you have any objections to this movie being made or shown as I said, possibly, exploiting the Holocaust rather than explaining it, or those kind of criticisms, of which there were when it came out?
I think there are a lot of criticisms to be made, and the film should be presented with maybe several notes or little asterisks. I do see its value in how it brought these conversations up in the early 80s when they weren't really being talked about yet. But I do think that if a film about the Holocaust is going to tell a story that's not a true story, it should be presented in a way that is accurate to the history and authentic to true experiences. So there are fictionalized accounts and fictionalized stories and movies that I think have a lot of power and tell incredible stories and can be used in a way to educate about the history. But I think sometimes they stray a little bit far, and this one is maybe a little
I'm
far.
going to now open it up to your questions.
Tom,
Again,
excuse me, I got something to say which is important.
please,
now.
go ahead.
There are two things.
Hold the microphone near your mouth. Close to you.
I don't know how to.
No, just hold it close.
Okay. We all seen as a flash that there was a woman hanging. My personal experience was, and I would like to add this to your question about how much accuracy is or not. I happened to be in Auschwitz during the time when the people who worked there, who were inmates themselves, decided to blow up one of the crematoriums. There were a few girls who have been Jewish girls who have been working in ammunition factories, and they were taking
The gunpowder.
some ammunition with them, and they were smuggling it in to the men who have been working in the crematoriums with the Germans, and they blew up some Germans, some crematoriums, and some of themselves. The girls have been found, and they have been punished. And we had to stay and stand straight in the cold in the morning with no food, with no clothes, obviously with no sitting, but just standing, watching how 4 girls have been hung. So this one swinging there reminded me of seeing 4 of our girls who have been taking a chance in order to stop the killings in the crematoriums and in the gas.
Yes, and we've seen this in some of the movies we've shown during.
And one more thing
Oh,
is
yeah, please.
important. The film mentioned, and another film very clearly showed that the commandant of Auschwitz has been transferred to Dachau. And the wife absolutely didn't want her to leave Auschwitz. She loved the house, she loved her garden, and when her husband was transferred, she actually said that she really would love to remain, let him go to work, and come back. But the children had to go with the mother because the family had to go where he went due to the fact that somebody else took over this very house after he left. And maybe you heard a few remarks which really caught me, and it was disgusting to hear how they referred that Dachau was better and Dachau was nicer, and the swimming was better in Dachau than in Auschwitz.
And the commandant who had been demoted to Dachau, once the Germans were really losing the war, and they decided that really what was the most important thing was to murder more Jews, they brought him back to finish up the job, which is terrible. But I'm now going to open it up to your question. But once again, please, no speeches. Questions only. If you want to talk to us afterwards, great. Your question, please.
Yeah, I always understood that when a woman came with
I can't hear.
Emotional scene made to disrupt the orderly process. And this made it sound as if the boy would be taken to a special children's area. I've never heard of that.
So the question is, first of all, was there a special children's area? And secondly, she always imagined that when you arrived at Auschwitz, there was no, they just sent you off.
choice.
Yeah, no choice.
They called that a selection.
Yeah.
There was no choice. Actually, I stood in front of Professor Mengele, Dr. Mengele, who had been called the angel of death. And as a transport arrived, and they were taken out of the cattle cars, of the box cars, right away they had to form a column, which was always 5. And the 5 were also separated as they came out, men and women. So the 5 of me personally was my grandmother, my mother, myself, my girlfriend and her mother. And we stood in front of Mengele, who was doing like this and like this. And very cruelly, I found that in retrospect, every time I talk about it, he was whistling the Blue Danube, which is a song.
And was there
I
a
used
Kinderlager
to ice skate
to
in
the Blue Danube?
Budapest when
Oh.
I was a teenager, before I was deported. I was ice skating to this very song, and I am standing in front of him while he is sending my grandmother and my girlfriend's mother, who had prematurely early white hair, so he looked old for him. This woman and my grandmother were sent to this side. And we were sent to this side. And as we stood here, I remember that we looked at them. And over there was obviously a different type of people, human beings, than we were. Over there were pregnant women, women holding their babies, little children up till 12. And they were, and also handicapped people with a cane or who with crutches. And we were at this side. And we could see, because on this side were a lot of family members of those who were on that side. They were sisters crying, they were mothers crying whose children were taken. So there was no choice, because you stood there, there were shepherd dogs on leashes. While this so-called selection has been taking place by this angel of death doctor, when they were doing left and right, there was no way that you could rebel, you could talk to them, like Sophie was pleading or talking. There was like an automatic, constant motion, and it went fast. And when we stood here, we were curious what's going to happen to them. It is amazing how, and I feel here very much about being Jewish, how we always feel in the most horrible situation in which I was at that moment, that we talked to each other, that I remember, and we said, they are selected separately because we will go to work, but they are not capable to work. They are children or pregnant women or babies or old people. So they separated them from us so that they are not going to have to go to work, only we will work. This is what we were thinking.
Yeah.
After we were processed and being naked and shaved, we asked the ones who were doing it, including the ones who tattooed us, what's happening to them. They have been going through several years. I am Hungarian, so the Hungarian transport was taken in 1944. I have such a pain for the Polish Jews who have been taken at the beginning to ghettos and from ghettos to Auschwitz. Basically, they built Birkenau, which is Auschwitz too. And from 1939 until 1944, they have gone through hell, watched their relatives and their loved ones disappear. And when we ask what happened to them, they couldn't pamper us or be sugarcoating or talk to us individually. All what they said, you see that chimney up there? You see the smoke? That's what happens to them. This is how I found out what happened to my grandparents and to our relatives.
Yeah. And to your question also, like Elie Wiesel was 13, but he managed to look a little older, and that kind of saved his life. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have two quick questions. One, you said you were in Auschwitz during the Auschwitz Revolt, which was on October 7th of 1944. I'm curious if you see any deeper connection between the fact that it was on October 7th, and now, of course, October 7th, 2023 is such an important date. And then my second question is, in the film, when she's in Auschwitz, it's very quiet, but when you read survivor testimony, they often say that when they were unloaded on the Judenraum, one of the first things they noticed was just how loud it was. And I'm curious, on a day-to-day basis, being in Auschwitz, will you constantly be hearing yelling and
I can't
screaming?
hear.
I'll repeat it. So one question is, when at Auschwitz in the film, it's quiet. But when you were at Auschwitz, was it a constant barrage of noise?
Constant. There was no quietness. Dogs were barking, Germans were screaming, yelling, beating. The capos, you know what capos are. You explain in case if somebody doesn't know.
Jewish policemen within the camp. Jewish,
Or Polish too.
yeah, Polish and Jewish
Uh,
bunk leaders.
Yeah, political
Yeah.
happening, absolutely. But I must insert here something because we are being questioned. I am here next to Rachel. There are several generations different between you and me. And I am very interested, even if I know that Rachel is working at the Holocaust Museum, doing an incredible job. We work together, but there is a way of different feeling of approaching, for instance, a film like that, or probably questions which you will answer, and I am very curious of your answers.
You have a comment to make about the different perspectives?
I think that's a very interesting.
Well, I don't
point.
know, I didn't hear the answer, the question.
One question was about the noise. The other question was about the fact that the revolt at Auschwitz was on
Well,
October.
That one I have to
Yes,
answer.
but but that was on October 7th.
And then
And
the
we-
significance of
and then
October
we had-
7th, 2023.
Yeah, I'm going to venture that it was also the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, and I think that was more significant. Plus the fact that it was a holiday weekend, so that everyone would be, their guard would be down, their defenses would be down. I don't think there's nothing I saw from the Hamas body cams or whatever's been recovered that links that to.
Hamas wasn't doing it because of Auschwitz. I'm just curious if you,
Oh.
on a spiritual level,
Okay, so I have to repeat it. So the question is whether you feel the murders, the Hamas murders on October 7th, if there's a connection that you feel to what occurred at Auschwitz.
I think he's asking specifically about the significance of the date repeating, which kind of in Jewish history, we notice patterns, I feel, especially patterns with numbers and dates. If you look at, you can see like lists of, there's Tisha B'Av, the anniversary of the destruction of the temple by the Romans, but then there's so many other catastrophes and major incidents that happen to the Jewish people on or around that same date or time. And I don't know if I see exactly a connection, but I see them as kind of repeating significant dates in the history of the Jewish people that will be continued to be remembered, the way that we just commemorated Tisha B'Av, and October 7th has become another one of those dates for us, unfortunately.
I feel working together with young generation, which we do have at the museum, and we work together, and in a way we are equal because we are both, or all of us, for the same purpose. We are educating the new generation, the younger ones than you guys. And I feel that, like you, Rachel, and like you, are carrying on our legacy for the time when we are no longer able to talk to you or to be around. And I feel that you are witnessing what we have been witnessed, and what you pass on, they are going to witness you. And I feel that the museum, especially now we are expanding, it's going to be even better and bigger. It's doing such an incredible service for humanity.
I don't think there's a better place to end tonight. We look forward to seeing you next year in the new auditorium, in the new museum, the 10th anniversary Holocaust film series. We'll see you then. Thank you all, and thank you, Mary, and thank you, Rachel.